Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach. Hashem, welcome. Hashem, today we're going to be learning Parashat Vayera. And as always, Baruch Hashem, we know that whenever you learn Torah Kedusha, you always see new things every single week that you never knew before. And Baruch Hashem, tonight is no different. So let us begin with the first pasuk. Again, sometimes you don't even have to go beyond the first pasuk to see the incredible chidushim that you never knew before. So over here, the pasuk starts off the following: Vayera elav Hashem be'elonei Mamre. So Hashem appeared to Avraham be'elonei Mamre, in the plains of Mamre. I want to talk a lot about that one line. That's the first four words of the parasha. Vayera elav Hashem be'elonei Mamre. Hashem appeared to Avraham in the plains of Mamre. What are the plains of Mamre? So let's focus on the word Mamre first of all. What is Mamre, or who is Mamre? So the answer is that there seems to be an argument amongst the Tanaim already in the Midrash about what is Mamre. So the Gemara, the Midrash rather tells us in Midrash Rabbah Parasha Membet Chet that Mamre al Da'ate de Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Shme Mamre. We're talking about a person that his name was Mamre. Al Da'ate de Rabbi Nechemia, according to Rabbi Nechemia, Atrahu Dishme Mamre. It was a place that was named Mamre, and this individual was named after the place. Very interesting. So the place was the name Mamre. So Avraham is now where? In the plains of Mamre. So this was either a place or it was the name of a person who owned property, and he had some nice open fields. And that's where Avraham was right now. So now, the question that Rashi asked, again, what is the story? Avraham just circumcised himself at the end of last week's parasha. He's an old man. He circumcised himself, right? And now we're talking after the circumcision. Right now, Avraham is in this location. Vayera elav Hashem. Hashem appears to Avraham, and Rashi tells us, why did he appear to Avraham? Rashi tells us levaker et hachole, to visit the sick person. And Rashi says when somebody has a circumcision, the heaviest day, the most painful day, is the third day after the circumcision. Day number 3 is when it's the most painful. You know, a lot of people that are even elderly people, even when they came to this country from Russia, let's say, where they were not able to have a circumcision, they did it over here. They actually went through a full procedure. Not easy, and you're old to go through that, but they did it. Like real Avraham Avinu, exactly what he, almost like the same thing. So Avraham Avinu did that, and it was the third day. So he was very sick. He was very ill, meaning it was painful for him. He was suffering because of what he was going through. And Hashem came to visit him. Levaker et hachole. From here we learn, by the way, that it's a mitzvah to visit the sick. Right? It's a very, very big mitzvah to visit those that are sick. And we actually learn a couple of things. You have to do, when you visit the sick, I'm going on a tangent for a little bit, but it's important to know, we learn from here that you have to visit the sick in a way that is beneficial to them. Now, it's always beneficial when you visit the sick, but if you are the type of guy that you chit-chat a little bit too much and the guy needs to sleep, right, he has to get better, so then sometimes it would be better if you just kind of stayed a little bit more quiet. Or the opposite, you see that he wants to keep talking, he wants you to listen to what he has to say, and you have to sit there. It's good for the guy, okay, so you stay. It has to be that you have in mind what's good for that person. I saw the poskim actually say that it's beneficial for you to visit the sick person even if he's asleep the whole time. The guy's knocked out. The reason is because when he wakes up, they'll say, so-and-so came to visit you. He'll feel good now. So-and-so came to visit me. He cares about me. It'll help him to get better. It says when you go to visit the sick person, you take 1/60th of the illness away. So it's a very big mitzvah, and we learn it from here, from Hashem himself who came to visit the sick. So if Hashem visits the sick, then definitely we have to visit the sick. Okay, very important. Now, very interesting. Says the Torah Kedusha, Avraham is where? in Elonei Mamre? There's a very interesting question here that the Mefarshim ask, and that is, why does the Torah have to specify that Avraham is in Elonei Mamre, in the plains of Mamre? We already know this. We already know exactly where Avraham lives, because the Torah in last week's parasha said that Avraham went to settle in Hebron, in the Elonei Mamre, which is the plains of Mamre, right? So we know where he is. Now, who is this guy? Who is Mamre? Right? If we go with this opinion that it's a name of a person. So we're introduced to him a couple of times in last week's parasha. It says Mamre had two brothers. One was Aner and the other one was Eshkol. So Aner and Eshkol and Mamre, they were all, the parasha last week tells us, they were all Baalei Berit Avraham. They were all members of the covenant of Avraham. They were all together with Avraham. So much so that Avraham had to go out to war. And it says that he went to fight against the four big empires. He wins. He comes back with his victory. The king of Sodom says, take the spoils of war for yourself. I'll take the people back. You take the spoils of war. Abraham says, no, I'm not taking anything except for who? Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Those three men that came with me, they get to take whatever they want. They get to take whatever they want, and don't say anything to them. You're not allowed to say anything. Whatever they want to take, they take. Okay? Very good. So much so, just to understand who these people were. It says that they were living in Hebron. Hebron is also called Kiryat Arba. Kiryat Arba, we know that the city of the four, usually we explain why is it called the city of four, because there were four pairs that were buried there in Hebron: Adam and Chava, Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. Four pairs. But there are some of Hashim that say that no, this was the city of the four great tzaddikim, Aner, Eshkol, Mamre, and Avraham, that were living there at the time. That's why they call it Kiryat Arba. So we're dealing with people that are seemingly righteous people. This is who Mamre is. Again, I'm talking about this guy. It's the first line of the parasha. Mamre, who is this fellow? And then Eliezer is sent in a couple of weeks. We're going to read about, or next week, we're going to read about Eliezer being sent to find a shidduch for Yitzchak. So Eliezer says, what happens if I can't find the shidduch from your family out in Padan Aram? What if I can't find somebody from there, from your family? It has to be somebody from Canaan. So who would it be? So Abraham says, don't you dare take anybody from this country that I'm living in, even Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. You cannot take their daughter. Abraham in the Midrash, he says, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that you want me, that I should get a daughter from these men. Don't do it. You can't do that. Okay, fine. But the fact that it was even on the table for a discussion already shows you these people were righteous people. They were holy people. Again, three brothers, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. We don't talk much about them. But it's in last week's parasha, it's in this week's parasha also. So where's Abraham? In Elonei Mamre. Says Rashi, why was Hashem revealing himself to Abraham in Elonei Mamre, in the plains of Mamre? Says Rashi a very interesting thing. Hu shenatan lo etza al hamila. Mamre is the one that gave him the advice regarding the Brit Milah. Lefichach nigle alav bechilko. That is why Hashem gave Mamre the zechut that I will appear, Hashem says, to Abraham on his property. It's like Lavdil, when the great tzaddik comes to town, every shul wants to be the one that gets to host him. When, let's say, Chacham David Yosef was here, we were very proud we got to host Chacham David, right? So every shul wants to, the honor, we get to host it. Mamre got to host Hashem. Hashem revealed himself to Abraham on his property. The question is why? Says Rashi, because Mamre gave Abraham the advice about the Brit Milah. Now, what advice about the Brit Milah? Hashem at the end of last week's Parashat said, Abraham, do a Brit Milah. So what advice exactly was needed? Okay? Is the question clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
That's 100%. What was the advice? What was needed? Do the Brit Milah. That's the end of the story, right?
Do it in publicly?
Oh, very good. That's one answer. We're going to talk about it. But let's get to the Midrash first. The Midrash that we have here explains it in a very interesting way. And it's going to be very puzzling. I'm going to read you a Midrash right now. It's kind of be like, what happened over here? Again, Midrash Rabbah Parashat Membet Chet. Says the Midrash, at the moment, at the time when Hashem said to Abraham, he told him to do the Brit Milah, halach v'nimlach begimel ohavav. He went and he consulted with his three beloved friends. Who are they? Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Okay. Now, again, they're tight, right? They literally went out to war together, right? They fought together. So you see that they're very precious to Avraham. Now, the mitzvah is to circumcise yourself. Amar lo Aner. Aner says, Kfar ben kuf shanata, you're 100 years old, Avraham. You're going to go and cause yourself suffering, right? So look what he says to him. Okay. Amar lo Eshkol. So Eshkol, the other brother, said, he says, what are you doing? You know what you're going to do? You're going to put yourself in a vulnerable position in front of your enemies. You know, they're going to find out that you're wounded. Now is the time to attack you. You made a lot of enemies for yourself over the years. Nimrod doesn't like you, and the other kings don't like you. A lot of people don't like you, right? You're nice to everybody, but they still don't like you. So they hear that you're in a state of weakness, they'll attack you. Right? So that's what Eshkol told him. Amar lo Mamre, then came along brother number 3, Mamre, and he said, Elokecha, your God, she'amad lecha bekivshan ha'esh, that helped you in the fiery furnace, when Nimrod threw you in the furnace of fire. Hashem helped you and saved you. Uva Melachim, and Hashem who helped you fight against the kings. Uba Re'avon, and when you were in famine in Canaan, you didn't have food to eat, Hashem helped you. So Hashem was with you all those times. Hadavar hazeh, this matter, she'amar lecha lamul, en ata shomea lo? You don't want to listen to Hashem when He tells you to circumcise yourself? Hashem was with you all this time. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem heard this conversation, and Hashem heard what Mamre told Avraham. And Hashem says to Mamre, Ata natata lo eitza lamul, you gave Avraham the advice to do the circumcision, like I said. Chayecha she'eni nigle alav lo bepaltin shel aner velo shel eshkol ela shelcha. Hashem says, I will reveal myself to him not in Aner's property, not in Eshkol's property, but only in your property, Mamre. Why? Since you gave him the advice to go ahead with the circumcision. Okay, that's what the Midrash says. Is the Midrash clear? 100%? Do you understand the Midrash? Okay. So what it sounds like it just said, and that's what Rashi seems to be quoting, is that Avraham looked for advice about doing the circumcision, it seems like, or not. And Aner said to him, doesn't sound right. You're 100 years old. What do you have to go through this for? You're 100 years old. And Eshkol said, well, I don't care about your age. I care about your vulnerability. Now you're going to be, vulnerable to an attack because they're going to know that you're weak. And Mamre said, hello, Hashem saved you from the Kivshan Ha'esh. Hashem saved you from the kings, the war against the kings. Hashem saved you in everything. So what? Hashem's not going to save you now? He's not going to help you now? And Avram listened to Mamre and went ahead with the circumcision. So it's an issue over here. And Farshim look at this midrash and they ask one big question. What's the question that they ask? Let's go. Oh, very good, Mr. Shilian, very good. Avram didn't trust Hashem. What does that mean? In other words, are you? Let's even more than that. Hashem told you to do a brit milah. Are you thinking maybe not to? Is there an option like that on the table?
You mean to brit milah is worse than the 11 tests that Hashem did from Abraham?
Oh, very good. Hashem took Abraham through 10 tests. 10 asara nisyonot nitnasa Abraham Avinu. And he went through all of them perfectly. He didn't fail in even one. And over here, he was told to do Brit Milah, and there was like a question mark. Maybe I shouldn't do it? Really? That's what the Midrash just said. You understand the question or no? It's a very clear question. Good. I saw a lot of answers to this question. I'm going to share them with you one by one, because everybody is bothered by this Midrash. So let's take it step by step. The first answer I saw comes from Sefer Ta'amei Minhagim and also the Chizkuni. They both say a similar answer. And they say that there was an idea of what to do after the Brit. The question was not whether or not to do the Brit. Of course he has to do the Brit. The question was, is there anything that can be done afterwards to make the pain a little bit lighter or to heal? So the Chizkuni says that he told Avram, you have to bandage it afterwards. You have to wrap it up. You can't just let it sit there. You have to, protect it that it should heal better. The Ta'amei Minhagim says something even more interesting. He says there was a plant called Eitzah, which means advice. When Rashi says that he gave him advice, it doesn't mean advice. Eitzah is the name of a plant that is medicinal and it helps to heal. And he says, if you look in the gematria of the name Mamre, Mamre is 281. Because Mem is 40, another Mem is 40, that's 80. Reish is 200, that's 280, and Aleph is 1, so 281. He says if you do the gematria of the word Refa, which means heal, right? Heal is also Reish is 200, Pei is 80, and Aleph is 1. So in other words, Mamre is coming to give advice how to heal the Brit Milah. He wasn't telling him do it. There was no, of course he's going to do it. It's a question of how to heal afterwards. That's the first answer that I saw. The second answer that I saw, guys, clear on the first one? Nice? Okay, good. Second answer that I saw is actually what Mr. Prayamipur said very nicely. Of course, there was no question that he's going to do it. The question was, should it be done privately without anybody knowing about it? Or could it be done even if people know about it? In other words, even in public, that everyone knows he's doing himself a circumcision right now. That was the question. This answer comes from the Dad Zekenim, from the Tosfot. Now, what then was the advice? What was the give and take? The answer is, they were telling him, listen, if you do this right now, publicly, and everybody knows about it, so you're putting yourself at risk. Your enemies will attack you. People that don't like you will come after you. You have a problem. Don't do it in public, do it privately, right? Now, what was Mamre telling Avraham? What was his response? His response was, look, you are not just doing something random. You are doing a mitzvah of Hashem. When you're doing a mitzvah of Hashem, you don't have to worry about anything. You're doing a mitzvah. You don't have to hide it. You're doing something that Hashem wants you to do. Now, guys, this message is so important, so important. The words that Mamre is telling Avraham, the words are that when you follow Hashem, you're never going to lose. You will never lose by doing what Hashem wants. You think that by doing a mitzvah, you're going to be vulnerable to an attack and they're going to come after you? He says, this is Hashem telling you to do it, and you're following what Hashem wants. You will never lose by doing what Hashem wants. You don't have to hide it. Don't worry about it. Abotai, that message is so powerful till this day. If only people would absorb that message. It's so important. So many times people, they think that by doing what's right, they're putting themselves at a disadvantage. By following Hashem, they're holding themselves back in some way. You never will lose by following Hashem. Ever. Never going to happen. I can't tell you how many times people want to send their child to a Goyish college. It's a disaster. And they say, well, we have to. Why? Because how's my son going to make a living if he doesn't have that degree from I don't know where? Right? How's he going to survive? Right? If I send him to learn Torah in yeshiva, he's not going to make it. Right? Rabotai, nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing. It's so important for us to understand this. When a person, you have to ask yourself one question. What does Hashem want? Does Hashem want my son to be sitting in Tum'ah for 4 years? Or does Hashem want my son to be growing in Kedusha, growing in learning, growing in Judaism, becoming a tzaddik? You think that you're going to lose out by your son learning Torah? You understand? You have to ask yourself this question honestly, guys. It's important to think about these things. You will never lose ever, ever, ever by doing what's right. That's what Mamre is telling Abraham. You think that by doing the mitzvah Brit Milah, you're going to suffer? You're going to suffer a loss? Never going to happen. And it stands true for everything. A person has a question to be honest in business or not. He can cut a corner. He can play games. He can all of a sudden make money disappear over here, over there. People do stuff all the time. And you think to yourself, you're gaining. Not gaining. Not gaining at all. But a person who's the opposite, who maybe overpays a little bit, who makes sure to be a little bit too honest in business, that guy is never going to lose. Never. Hashem is very proud of such a person. You'll never lose by doing what's right. It's important. We have to be clear on this, guys. Very clear. You'll never lose by doing what Hashem wants you to do, ever. Those very same yeshiva people that everyone says, oh no, how are they going to make a living? These guys, Ben Porat Yosef, are making a living, very good livings. And these people, I'm telling you, there's a will, there's a way. These guys get a wonderful degree at college 2 nights a week, what everyone else is spending 4 years dorming and whatever. 2 nights a week, they go into wherever college, they do their thing, they come out. In less than 2 years, they have the same degree as everybody else. I had a kid in yeshiva. He wanted to become a lawyer. He was in yeshiva for 2 years, just yeshiva, 2 years. Went straight to law school afterwards. If there's a will, there's a way. You could do it. You could do it. Never have to be afraid of that. That's what Mamre is telling Avraham Avinu over here, guys. Very important. Okay, now, by the way, we find this concept not only in this mitzvah, we find it also by Shemitah. This past year was a Shemitah year. You had people that literally their farming is their livelihood. They did not farm the whole year. And you say, so how are they going to survive? Hashem says, I promise you, you'll be fine. You listen to me, you'll be fine. Comes up with Shabbat. A lot of times people say, if I don't open up on Shabbat, how am I going to survive? You'll be fine. The opposite, you'll do much better. It says by the 3 festivals. By the 3 festivals, you have to go up to Yerushalayim for Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. The whole country's in Yerushalayim and your borders are now open to attack. And we're terrified. What's going to happen? They could come attack us. Hashem says, don't worry. You're going to be okay. Who could promise that? By the way, this is a beautiful proof that Torah is min hashamayim. Who could promise that? Imagine. Who could make such a promise? Hashem says, you have to send the whole country to Yerushalayim 3 times a year. And Hashem says, and don't worry, I know what you're thinking. How are we going to protect the borders? Nobody's there. Everyone left Tel Aviv, everyone left Haifa, everyone left Ashdod. Everyone's in Yerushalayim. Maybe not women, but all the men are there. Okay? So then how are we going to defend ourselves? Hashem says, no, lo yachmod ish et aretzecha. Nobody's going to want your land. They're not going to come to you. I promise you. You won't lose out. Who could make such a promise if not for Hashem? It's an amazing thing if you think about it. That's an important point to think about. Okay. Getting back to our question. Again, how could it be that Avraham was thinking not to do the Brit Milah? So the answer is that we saw two answers already. We said, first of all, no, it wasn't. Of course, he was thinking to do the brit. The question was about how to heal afterwards. Second answer was, of course, he was thinking to do the brit, maybe not to do it publicly, only privately. And Mamre told him, no, do it normal, everything good. Okay. Third answer that I saw was from the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher. The Rosh says a very interesting thing. He says that Avraham did, when he was told this mitzvah, that he has to do a brit, so the first thing he did was he started going to all the members of his household. Whoever he had that was a boy in his household, not only his own children, people that were working for him, people that anybody related to him, he was going and doing a brit on everybody. And whoever he did a brit on, died. That's what the Rosh says. Whoever he did the brit milah on him, he died. Now, Avraham was very concerned about this. He said, I don't understand. Why? I'm doing a brit milah. Hashem said to do it. Everyone's dying. Says the Rosh, that's where Mamre came in. Mamre told him, no. What did Hashem say? Hashem, when he told you to do the mitzvah, he didn't just say, circumcise yourself. He says, himol yimol, double language. Himol yimol kol zachar, which means that it says circumcise, you shall circumcise. Why the double language? Says Mamre, Hashem is telling you that you need to circumcise yourself first before you circumcise other people. You have to be the leader in this.
So you can watch.
Exactly. How can you go and tell somebody else to circumcise himself before you yourself are circumcised? That's why there was double language. Himol yimol. So that says the Rosh, that's what Mamre told Avram. And after he circumcised himself, then the Pasuk says, then Yishmael tagged along, and then everybody else in his household circumcised themselves too. So that way, you're not, quote unquote, God forbid to even say such a thing in the same sentence as Avram, you're not a hypocrite. You can't tell others to do it, you yourself don't do it. It's a very important thing to know, by the way, that the Zohar Kadosh says, if you ever decide that you want to rebuke someone, you want to give it to somebody on the head, say, how could you do this, and that, but you have the same problem, and you yourself have the same issue, says the Zohar, it causes a lot of trouble for you. It causes you a lot of trouble. You can't do that. If you know you have the same problem, so you have to say, I also have the same problem. You have to also include yourself in the rebuke. You can't just give it to somebody else and not include yourself, which is important to be aware of.
Well,
Yes,
how
sir.
did Mamre know what was said to Abraham Avinu? It was said only to
He
Abraham
said,
Avinu.
he came and said, what did Hashem tell you? What are the exact words Hashem said?
When he
He said,
repeated it.
Himol yimol lachem kol zachar. Oh, he said, Himol yimol? Double language? There's a reason for that.
So
He
how
could have
did
just,
he understand better than
Huh?
Abraham Avinu, the descendants of Hashem? Abraham Avinu was more connected to Hashem.
and Mamre was a tzaddik. It could be that Avraham was excited to do it. He just went ahead and did it. But that part, he saw something was off. So he figured there must be something here. So Mamre said, let's think about it. Oh, maybe that's the issue.
More clear.
That is the answer of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher. Amazing. I saw another answer. Another beautiful answer. By the way, before we move on, I just want to tell you, you should know about this concept. Many times people want to rebuke somebody, but you should know this line by heart, okay? You need to know this line by heart, okay? The line is like this. It's a Gemara in Kiddushin. The Gemara in Kiddushin says, Kol haposel bemumo posel. Know this line by heart. 4 words. Kol haposel bemumo posel. It's a yesod gadol. It's a foundation, very important, which the Gemara starts off like this. Over there, it's talking about an idea that it says that if somebody ever comes and says that he is a descendant of the royal dynasty of the Hashmonaim, and therefore he should be accepted, he should be allowed to marry into the Jewish people. Who are the Hashmonaim guys? We know the Hashmonaim were from the story of Hanukkah, right? The story of Hanukkah, they went ahead and they got rid of the Greeks and they became the kings. They weren't really supposed to become kings because they're Kohanim, and Kohanim are not from the seed of David HaMelech. So they were supposed to hand over the kingship back to the dynasty of David. They didn't. They kept it for themselves. And Hashem eventually knocked out their kingdom, and it was done by none other than a slave who took over, that was Hurdus. Hurdus was a slave that and ended up killing that entire dynasty out and taking over the kingdom of Am Yisrael. So now what happened was he'd left one daughter to procreate with her and have children that would end up being quote unquote royalty. But the halakha says it always follows the father. The genealogy, like a Kohen marries a regular non-Kohen girl, the baby's a Kohen. A regular Yisrael marries a Kohen girl, the baby is Yisrael, right? It always follows the father when it comes to the tribe that you're from. So over here, the children, even though their mom may have been royalty, but the kid would be a slave because this kid, meaning the kid would have the legal status of a slave. Therefore, the Gemara says anybody who comes and tells you that he should be allowed to marry into the Jewish nation because he comes from the royal family of the Hashmonaim, you should know he's a slave. Okay, fine, very good. Says the Gemara, there was such a person that was claiming that there was such a person that saw another guy trying to get married, and he said, that guy, he's a slave. Says the Gemara, you should know that kol haposel, if you disqualify someone else, and you say that fellow can't marry into the Jewish nation because he's a slave, right? So then you should know the very person who's claiming that fellow is a slave, he himself is a slave. Kol haposel, when you disqualify someone else, bemumo posel, I'm disqualifying you with the very blemish that I am affected by. I'm saying you're a slave, I'm a slave. Like the famous line that when you point your finger like this, 3 fingers point back at you, right? That's the way it is. So over here says the Gemara, very important to understand that here's a person going ahead and saying this guy has this, and this guy has that, and etc., A, B, C, etc., all that stuff this person had. Meanwhile, he has his own problems. He has his own issues to deal with. So Mamre says to Avraham, you want to go circumcise the world? What about yourself? Right? What about yourself? You can't go ahead and do it. You have to circumcise yourself first. That was the chidush of Mamre, that the double language informed him of that idea. Okay. And then one last point about this question. Again, I told you I saw a lot of answers to this question, but it's we didn't finish the first pasuk of the parasha. Amazing. There's so much to say about it. One more point about this question. So we know Avraham Avinu fulfilled all the mitzvot of the Torah Kedosha, but not only did he fulfill the mitzvot of the Torah, he even fulfilled the mitzvot that are midirabanan. For example, muktzeh on Shabbat. You can't move something which is, let's say, money or things like that on Shabbat. That is a rabbinic invention. The Torah doesn't say that you can't do that. The rabbis made up that rule. Avraham Avinu kept that too. He kept all the mitzvot. He kept everything. Very interesting. The parasha next in 2 weeks from now says that Avraham kept everything. Yes.
No, he wasn't a Kohen, and there was no Kohanim, so how did he do the mitzvah?
He kept whatever it is that he could keep. Right? Like you're right. He wasn't a Kohen. That's why it says he gave maaser. He would be a Kohen. He couldn't give maaser. You're right. Because Melchizedek, it was Shem, the son of Noach, had the status of a Kohen. Melchizedek, he gave him maaser at the end of in the middle of last week's parasha. So you're right. There are certain things he can't do, but the point is that he kept everything. Over here, the question was like this: when you keep everything because you want to, that's beautiful, but it's not the same as when you keep a mitzvah that you're obligated to keep. Chazal teach us a very interesting thing. Again, another Gemara in Kiddushin, which says, Gadol ha-mitzuveh ve'oseh mimi she'eino mitzuveh ve'oseh, which means greater is the person who is commanded to do something and does it than someone who is not commanded to do it and does it. Okay? Like, for example, if I ask you to, let's say you see that the park is dirty, right? And you go and you clean up the park out of the goodness of your heart. People left trash all over the place. You go, you clean it up one by one, you throw it out. Beautiful. Then you have a guy that he has to do time or whatever. They tell him you got to do community service. He goes, walks around, cleans it up because he has to do it. Has no choice. So which one is on a higher level?
The one that
First one.
So you all say the first one, right? So says the Gemara, no. Gadola metzuveh ve'oseh. The guy that is told, he's obligated to do it is on a higher level. You know why? Because when a person is told to do something, naturally he rejects it. You're going to tell me what? You're my boss? I owe you something? You're going to boss me around, tell me what to do? Guess what? I'll throw the stick in your face. You clean it up, right? There's a natural feeling of, you're not going to boss me around. There's an automatic rejection. If a person is willing to subdue that and say, you know what, even though I'm feeling like I want to shove whatever this thing in that guy's face, who's he to boss me around? But I say, you know what, I'm actually going to work on myself, lower myself, and make myself do it because I have to. So that takes work, right? The other guy had no obligation to clean it up. So he just went out of the goodness of his heart and he did it, right? He didn't have to fight his Yetzer Hara in order to do it. Says the Gemara, Gadola metzuveh ve'oseh, it's greater when someone does something in a state of being obligated to do it than when he does something and he's not obligated to do it. The question that Avraham had was like this. He says, out of all 613 mitzvot, I'm not obligated in pretty much any of them, at least very few of them. You have to be fruitful and multiply. That applied to Avraham Avinu. But out of all 613, I don't have any obligations in any of them. What should I do, Mamre? He's asking his friend Mamre. Should I go ahead and circumcise myself because I know that Hashem wants us all to be circumcised? But I'm also aware of the fact that if I hold off a little bit, eventually I'll become obligated to circumcise myself. At which point, it'll be better for me because I'll have more reward. It's greater to do it when you're obligated than when you're not obligated. So what's better? Should I rush to do a mitzvah like right now, even though I know down the road I'm going to be obligated? Or should I wait for the obligation to kick in and then do it? That was his question. Mishpatei Shmuel. So what did Mamre say? Okay, Sasson, yeah?
Isn't he obligated the minute Hashem wants to do it?
That was the question. We're talking now before Hashem told him to do it, where already he knows all the mitzvot of the Torah. He knows he has to eat matzah on Pesach. He knows he has to eat candy on Yom Kippur, and he's keeping it anyway. But should he circumcise himself too before the commandment comes in? Yes or no? That was his question to Mamre. Mamre said, hold it. Hold off on the brit until you are commanded to do it. Why? Because you get infinitely more reward when you do it in a state of being obligated to do it than if you do it by your own will. And that's what happened. So Hashem says to Mamre, you told Avraham to hold off on the mitzvah of Brit Milah until I actually make him obligated, so that what? So that he should get more reward. So Mamre, I'm going to give you reward that when I reveal myself to Abraham, it's going to be on your property. Yeah, is it clear or no? Yeah, okay, yes.
Obligation to go to this shiur?
Yes, every single one of you is out.
No.
Yeah, okay.
But whoever come,
Yeah.
if you mitzvah, it's the same thing. So
No.
you
It's
don't
not
have
true.
to, but
No.
when you come, you do mitzvah.
No, because you have to learn Torah. You have a mitzvah to learn the Torah every day. Ve'agita bo yomam v'layla. You have to learn Torah in the morning, you have to learn Torah at night. So now you're fulfilling the mitzvah that you...
So let's take this guy, he learning at home.
Yes, that you could
So
do.
he obligated to come here or not?
No, he doesn't have an obligation.
So
I'll be honest with you.
okay.
There is
I'll
a
be honest with you.
difference, bro.
But,
He's
but,
not married,
yeah.
it's okay.
He's not obligated to come. But
okay, he could do it at home. He
When
could
he
he could
come-
he could be at home on Zoom too. It's true.
If he come here
Okay.
and he listen,
Yeah.
his mitzvah is not more than if he
Yes, because he could have fulfilled it by just saying Shema. Now he did it in a better way. But the point is that the fact that he's doing it at all, let's say, for example, the same exact situation but a person is he's I don't know, 9 years old. 9 years old doesn't have the obligation. So they come and they want to hear it. That's beautiful. That's great. But it's not the same level as somebody who does have the obligation. That's what I'm trying to say. When somebody has the obligation, it says his reward is much greater. Because when you're obligated, you naturally have a rejection towards it. That's the feeling that you have.
You don't have to do something, and you go do it by yourself.
The Yetzer Hara is a lot stronger, telling you, oh, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's not a
And then
sin,
you
just
do it.
stay home and don't do it.
You don't have the mitzvah to begin. It's not a Yetzer Hara. That's my point. You don't have an obligation to do it in the first place. When you are saying, you know what, I don't want to do it, it's not Yetzer Hara. You don't have an obligation to begin with. Here you have an obligation, and your Yetzer Hara is telling you, don't do your obligation, ignore your obligation, and you fight and you still do it anyway. That's a higher level.
This was a mitzvah.
Eventually it got to that point. But in the beginning, when Abraham was already keeping the Torah before Hashem told him, he didn't have an obligation. And the question was, should I do the circumcision now while I still don't have the obligation? Or should I do it only after the obligation kicks in when Hashem tells me? And the Gemara said, hold off on it till Hashem tells you. That was the advice that he gave him.
Hey,
Okay.
Rabbi, I have a question on that.
Yes.
Didn't we say that this is David Soleimani? How are you, Rabbi?
Hi, David. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. Didn't we say that Mamre, he only consulted with Mamre after Hashem commanded him to get the circumcision, not before?
According to what I'm telling you now, that's not true. It was a consultation ahead of time.
So meaning both
Different
before and
explanation,
after?
right? This is from the Mishpatei Shmuel. Very interesting shot that he says. Beautiful, great question, David.
Man.
Okay, excellent. Okay, now, gentlemen, let's move on beyond the first pasuk. 1 second, let's see. Oh, wow. Okay, okay, let's continue. I want to share with you an incredible thought. The Gemara tells us that we know that as this was going on, Avraham is waiting for guests. Now Hashem wanted Avraham to be in bed, resting, healing, getting himself better. But Avraham was very sad that there were no guests. So he was sitting outside waiting for guests, and it was Kechom Hayom, it was the hottest day. Hashem took the sun out of its casing, and it was blazing hot. But Avraham just had to be outside looking for guests to bring into his home. That's who he was. He wanted to always give and always do good for people. Okay, Hashem sees it's not working. The sun is not preventing Abraham from going to bed. So Hashem sends him these three individuals that we know are malachim. They're angels, but really they're disguised as men. So Abraham sees them. They look like Arabs. And it says that Abraham goes to them and he tells them, okay, I want you to please come to my home, right? Please come to my house. It says, V'ekcha pat lechem, I will take bread, v'sa'adu libchem, you'll eat, v'achar tavor, then afterwards you'll go. But he says, also, yukachna mat maim, some water shall be taken for you, have a little bit and then you go. Says the Gemara something amazing. When Avraham told these men, I will take bread for you, it says, V'ekcha fat lechem. He said, I will take the bread for you. I will do it, right? The Gemara in Masechet Bava Metzia says, because Avraham said, I will do it, so Hashem says, as a reward for you, when your sons are in the desert, Hashem says, I will give them their food. And the man, which is the food that the Jews had in the desert, came down from Hashem direct. No intermediary. Now, on the other hand, so again, why? Because Avraham said bread. Hashem said, okay, the bread that you gave direct to my angels. So when I send bread from Shamayim, it comes from me direct to your kids. Right? Okay. Okay, good. But the point is, it could be B'zchut Moshe Rabbeinu, but it says over here that because of the question is, how is it coming? How is the man coming? So the answer is it's coming direct, because when Avraham gave the bread to the Malachim, it was himself personally direct. So Hashem says the man comes to the Jews direct from me. Nobody in the middle. However, yes.
When Abraham gave the bread to the angels, if he wouldn't do it direct, then Hashem wouldn't give him the man.
You're right. Listen to this. What did he say about the water? The words are very clear. Yukachna me'at mayim. Yukach is not ekach. Ekach means I will take for you some water. Like you said, by the bread, I will take bread. But by the water, he says yukachna, which means that a messenger should be the one to bring you the water. In other words, Yani, I'll send somebody to give you water. Not I'm going to bring you water, I'll send somebody. Rashi says, Al yidei shaliach, through a messenger. Says Hashem, okay, you want to give the angels water through someone else? No problem. When your children are in the desert, they're going to get water from someone else. What's that? It's the Be'er Miriam. That's the rock that Moshe always had to either speak to or hit, right? So very good. You're going to get water through that. Now, wait a second. Says Rabbi Yankel Galinsky an amazing idea. He says over here, look at what happened. You have the man coming directly from Hashem, but the water is coming through the rock. Now, the water coming through the rock is not the end of the world. The only problem is that there's going to be a time when Moshe and Aaron have to speak to the rock, and eventually it's not working. Little drips come out, and what do they do? Moshe hits the rock. Moshe hits the rock. So then what happens because of that? He doesn't get to go into Israel. So then whenever the Jewish people go and conquer the land, and they eventually build Bet HaMikdash, since Moshe Rabbeinu didn't build it, because Moshe is Emet. Emet lasts forever. So if Moshe's golden touch would have built the Bet HaMikdash, it would never have been able to be destroyed. Now that Moshe is not in Israel, the whole Bet HaMikdash could be destroyed. So all of that happened from what? Says Rabbi Yankel Galinsky, amazing? From the fact that what? That Abraham didn't give the water to the Malachim direct. It's amazing. Because he gave it to them indirectly through somebody else. That's why this happens. Wow. The idea is, it's so important. I always try to stress this concept, which is that we have no clue what the ramifications of our actions are. We just don't have any idea. You don't understand. When you give tzedakah right now to a poor person, you don't know, but that tzedakah may have just saved your children's children down the line. You have no clue what you just did. Or the opposite. You have no idea. I told you guys, I think Rabbi Ben Porat told me, may he live and be well, he told me that the Stipler Gaon, the father of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, told him that any person today who is Choser B'Tshuva, who comes closer to Hashem, it's only for one reason. He had some grandfather or great-grandfather down the line, or grandmother, somebody who was Moser Nefesh, who did above and beyond for Hashem. That because of what that grandfather or grandmother did, that's why today you or your son is Shomer Shabbat, Shomer Torah Mitzvot. You have to have zichut for that. You can't just, it doesn't just come from out of nowhere, because so many people in this country and all over the world, they never even heard about Shabbat. They don't know that you say Sha'akol in a cup of water. They don't know nothing. How come you know? You have zichut avot. You have zichut from your forefathers. So over here, it's amazing. You see that by one little action, Abraham either getting him the bread himself or getting the water himself, look at the difference and look at what an effect it had. It's so important for us to realize everything is the same thing for us too. The little way that you put on your tefillin, or are you schmoozing in shul, or are you davening in shul, or are you sending your kids to the right place or not, all that stuff, it has a huge effect on the future. We don't know what it could be, but it does. That's how these things work. Hashem has all of these things lined up in calculation since the beginning of time till the end of time. We can do very good for ourselves if we do what's right. It's an amazing thing. See how we're doing on time?
When Moshe Rabbeinu passed away,
yes,
they didn't have man and they still wasn't deserve, right? So basically what it says, because Abraham Avinu said that Hashem said, I'm going to give you man when you standing in the mikvah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, Hashem has cut the man, but still they were in the mikvah. What the man? And after Miriam died,
yeah,
no water.
okay. Eventually, it had to stop. There was a time where it had to stop. Eventually, the man had to stop, and the water also had to stop.
That conversation. It was because of Moshe Rabbeinu. But he passed away. The
question was, the point that I was trying to make is that the whole reason that it came about through the rock is because of Avraham not giving it to the Malachim direct. That's what the Gemara tells us. That's why Hashem said that I'm going to give it to them because you gave them water. I give you water in the desert, but I'm not doing it directly.
He gave them bread. Hashem is going to give them bread in back, right?
Yes.
So because of that.
But the point that I'm making is that it was direct. It was directly from Shamayim. It came down. That's what the Gemara is telling us.
Put that conversation, Hashem give them man.
Directly. The point is the man could come through other ways. The man came from the Zechut of Moshe. There Miriam came from the Miriam. Yeah.
So if it's like that, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, why Hashem accept the man?
That's my point. The man is coming anyway. The question is how. Avraham is not telling you whether the man is coming or not. Avraham is telling you how does the man come. The man comes, that's because of Moshe. But how does it come? Does it come direct or does it come indirect? That was what Avraham is doing. You see what I'm saying? Okay, guys, you have a little room for a little bit more.
Yes.
One more thing, guys. I want you to know this because it's very relevant. Okay. One more point, gentlemen. One more point. The sushi is about to be opened up. 1 more minute, gentlemen. One last point. You should know this, guys. Very important. It's very important to be aware of these things. It says that Vayas Avraham Mishte Gadol, right? Avraham made a big party beyom higamel et Yitzchak. Okay? On the day that Yitzchak was weaned. Weaned means that he stopped nursing from his mom. Tosfot in Masechet Shabbat says that higamel, weaned, doesn't really mean weaned. Weaned usually means like around 2 years old, he stops nursing. Here, he says, no, break down the word higamel. Higamel is hey, gimel, mal. Mal means circumcised on hey, gimel. What's hey? Hey is letter hey, which is 5. Gimel is 3. That's 5 and 3 is 8. Higamel, 5 and 3, when Yitzchak was circumcised, this week's parasha, that's when Avraham did a huge party for him. Says the Gemara. It's so important, guys. You have to know this. It's a really important lesson. Any mitzvah that the Jews did, besimcha, with happiness, when we got that mitzvah, until this very day, is always done with pure happiness. Okay? So till this day, somebody wants to make a brit. Usually a brit is a beautiful, smooth event. Get a caterer, get your bagels, get your tuna, lox, whatever it is you want to do. Or if you want to go the calipache style, calipache, you want to do that? I can't go near calipache. I don't know. Okay, fine. Anyway, you want to do that? It's all good. But it's smooth. The point is it's smooth. There's no issue. Usually it's a very smooth event. Says the Gemara, but there was one other event that when the Jews received that mitzvah, they were very upset about it. And that is when the Jews received the mitzvah of who you're allowed to marry and who you're not allowed to marry. When they got the mitzvot about you used to be able to have relations with this woman, that woman, this woman, that woman, and now they're all forbidden to you. We got that mitzvah at Har Sinai, and it says that Moshe heard the entire nation was crying. Right? Bochel mishpechotav, says the Gemara. They were all crying. Al iskei mishpechotem. What? I don't know if it was just the man. I don't know if it was just the man. But everybody was in tears about that mitzvah because they were permitted in all these ladies and all these types of relations, and now they're forbidden. They were all literally crying. Says Hashem, you're crying about a mitzvah that I'm giving you? Says the Gemara, until this very day, let ketubah de lo rameh bat tigara. There's never any kind of wedding without some kind of a fight. Okay? My wife, may she be well, she's got kalot at every single night. There's another bride at my house. Another bride getting married. There's, and these brides, they all talk to my wife all the time. And they always tell her, there's an issue with this, there's an issue with that, this side, that side, they said this, they said that. These guys want these brachot, that brachot, all these different things. And the chuppah and the wedding is always incredibly stressful for everybody. And everyone thinks that they're the only people that are going through this. It's not true. Everyone goes through this. You want to know why we all go through this? We all go, hopefully you should never go through it. It should all be good, but everybody goes through this. Why? Because when we originally got the mitzvah of the laws of marriage, we were crying. It wasn't pleasant for us. We didn't like it. We weren't happy about it. Think about that. It's not so pleasant. Now you can't do X, Y, and Z. We were literally crying. Hashem says, you're crying about a mitzvah I gave you? Till this day, the marriages are probably engagement is probably the most stressful time for a couple. And it's like that for everybody. But again, it's just beautiful proof that the Torah, when it says something, the Gemara tells us something, it's emet, we all see it. That's just the way it is. I'm sure you can think about your own engagement. Everyone had these situations coming up. It's important to be aware that there's a reason behind it. That is what the Gemara tells us, that when originally we accepted it with crying. You should know about that important information. Okay. Chazakim Buchim, guys, we'll stop over here. Thank you. Kol Tov Shavua Tov. Yes. Okay.